Hey, what is going on everybody, and welcome to Fantasia, home of the Melodious. My name's Azallea, and today, gonna be bringing you guys the update to my Melodious deck. Now before we jump into that, I first just have to apologize for, being so inactive on the channel. I've been trying to get my, life together. I've had a lot of things going on with work and a lot of personal things. It's not really been a great year for me so far, so hopefully that's gonna be changing in the coming weeks and coming months. So anyway, with that out of the way, sorry about that guys. Hopefully we're gonna be on a more regular, consistent schedule from now on. But yeah, let's just jump into this. So starting off, we're of course going to be playing our Melodious monsters. So starting off, 2 copies of Ari the Melodious Diva. I prefer playing 2 in this deck because of the fact that I never really want to draw into her. She's a card that's better off in your deck or on your side of the field rather than in your hand. So there's that. Next up, I'm playing 3 copies of Soprano, the Melodious Songstress. If I am going to draw into a Melodious monster that I need to normal summon, Soprano is the one that you want to go for. So having 3 copies of her is actually pretty good. You do want to see her in order to make your fusion plays because of her innate effect, so that's always good. Next up, we're playing 2 copies of Canon, the Melodious Diva. I was originally playing 3 copies, but the reason why I cut this down from 3 to 2 is because there's those times where I have too many copies of her in the hand, and you can only special summon her to your side of the field once per turn, so it's quite a shame. But that's the reason why I cut it from 3 to 2. Otherwise, it'd be a deck that's over 40 cards, and I want to keep it 40 to keep it consistent as possible. So yeah, 2 copies of Canon is all I could do for now. But we are playing 3 copies of Sonata, the Melodious Diva, and Sonata, just like Canon, if you control a Melodious monster, you can special summon to your side of the field. And 3 copies of Sonata is really good because I do play Transmodify, and it helps you climb into Soprano, which gets you an instant Shuberta on your side of the field, which is actually not too bad, seeing as a lot of decks now are actually really graveyard reliant, the most recent one that I can think of being Salamangreats, right? So it's a really, really good interaction right there, and of course Sonata's attack boosting effect is also very useful as well for attacking over some monsters, especially given that this is a pure Melodious build, so we don't have too much utility going on in this deck. Okay, so moving on, we are also playing 1 copy of Elegy, the Melodious Diva. Elegy is here because I play Transmodify for the Sonata. This just gives me more options to go into, so if I Transmodify a 4 into an Elegy, that gives me some field protection as well, which is kind of good because Interrupted Kaiju Slumber is now at 3. Now, of course, Melodious monsters are still vulnerable to kaijus themselves, but having access to Elegy that just prevents board wipes from happening and gives your opponent a bit of a tougher time is always kind of nice. Okay, so next off, I'm playing 1 copy of Chopina, the Melodious Maestra. You could play Mozarta, but I think Chopina's level is a little bit better because Transmodify can help you climb into a level 8. Speaking of level 8s, I am playing 1 copy of Arclor Christia. Now, Chopina is usually just here to be sent off of Ostinato so that you can immediately summon a Bloom Prima or a Bloom Diva from your extra deck for basically for free. So that's why she's here. She's also really good because she can recover a light fairy type monster from your graveyard and add it back to your hand, and the card that you're mostly going to be looping, if it's not a Melodious monster, is going to be Honest. So 1 copy of Honest as a tech here. It is really good because it is also a level 4 light fairy type monster, so you can use Ties of the Brethren on it. I know you guys have been asking me, hey, can I incorporate Ties of the Brethren into my deck? And yes, this build is actually a very lock-oriented build, which I'm not really too big of a fan of, but because we have stuff like Christia to help back us up at times, it's actually not too bad. So yeah, these are the rest of the main deck monsters that we have right here. Next off, we have some hand traps. Now, I'm only playing 3 hand traps in this deck, and so I blanked these out. These are proxies, right? You can play any hand trap that you want, really, in this deck. It doesn't really matter. Droll and Lockbird's a really strong one in this format, especially with all these like Salamangreats running around searching and stuff. This deck isn't meant to play against the meta, but against more casual decks, Ash Blossom is a really good generic card that you can use. I prefer playing Ash Blossom in this deck because I play it in a more casual setting. But Droll and Lockbird's one, if you're playing against more of the modern decks, it's really good for locking them out of a turn. You can play Ghost Ogres, Effect Veilers as budget options. It's really up to you at this point. So yeah, 3 hand traps. It's up to you what you play. And next off, we're going to go into the spell cards. So for the spell cards, starting off, we're playing, of course, you have to play this, 3 copies of Ostinato, the card that just gets you your fusion monster for free, as long as you control no monsters on your side of the field, which is quite a shame, because if you draw into it on a later turn after you've already established a field, it's kind of dead. But one other card that you can use to help establish a field if you don't draw into your Ostinato first turn is Ties of the Brethren. And now this is a card that's absolutely amazing for establishing a bunch of monsters onto your side of the field, including Arya. Arya being one of the main pieces in this deck to help you protect your field. Now, Honest is here instead of Score because it's a level 4, so you can actually use Ties of the Brethren on your Honest to bring out like a Soprano and an Arya from your deck. You can also use Ties on Cannon. It's a shame that I don't play 3 cannons because it'd be nice to have that extra consistency with Ties of Brethren, but it's also, you know, the downside is that you actually clog with too many cannons in your hand, so you don't really want to draw into too many. So yeah, 3 Ostinatos, 3 Ties of Brethren, and of course we're also playing 3 copies of Transmodify. Now this card, you really don't want this to be Ash Blossomed, it would really suck, but Transmodify on a Sonato would be really good on getting Soprano out. You can also get Elegy out, you can get Christia out. Christia can also be summoned if you use the Ostinato. To bring out your Bloom Prima, which is a level 7. So you can transmodify your Bloom Prima into your Christia, and then Bloom Prima can add a Melodious monster from your graveyard back to your hand, which is a really neat interaction with this deck. So these are your 3 like power spells to help you make most of your first turn boards. Now next off, we're playing 3 copies of Pot of Extravagance or Indulgence or whatever you want to call it. Now you could play Pod Desires. There's nothing wrong with playing Pod Desires if you don't want to go ahead and buy this, but I'm playing mostly online now, so in testing, Pot of Extravagance is really good, not only because you don't have to banish, you don't have to have the chance of banishing your one-ofs like Elegy, Chopina, Christia, and things like that, but it's just, you don't tap into your extra deck nearly as often as other decks do, so 3 copies of this is absolutely fantastic, and it's just really good for helping you draw into your Ostinato, draw into your Ties, draw into your Transmodifies before you start the rest of your plays. Okay, so with that aside, again, you can also play Pod Desires. This is not like, you don't have to play Extravagance here. We're playing 3 copies of Call by the Grave. Now, Call by the Grave is really important because hand traps actually hurt this deck a lot with our power plays. So Ties of Brethren, Transmodify, Ostinato, all 3 of these cards just get absolutely destroyed by Ash Blossom. And so having that Call by the Grave to give you the protection before you make your moves is really, really good. Now, an alternative to playing this is actually playing Gammas, Cypher and Gamma. Because of the fact that Ostinato requires you to have no monsters on your side of the field, so it already synergizes with Gamma there. Ties is not really as great, and Transmodify not really as great, but yeah. It's another option that you could play if you don't want to play Ash Blossoms for your hand traps, which, I mean, they're really accessible now because they got reprinted in the structure deck. But yeah, Call by the Grave is still really good in that regard. Okay, and then for my other spells, let's just move this over here. We have 2 copies of Twin Twisters. Now, I was originally playing 3, then I realized, hey, not every deck plays back row, even though we are in a format where Twin Twisters is pretty good, especially with all those Azathoth decks running around. It's really good for you to hit the back row during the draw or standby phase, because they have to wait till the main phase in order to activate their rank up spell for the Phantom Knights to summon the Azathoth to their side of the field. So this is definitely something that's really good against those types of decks. Again, if you're not really playing a competitive environment, this is just good for getting rid of back row before you make your plays. And then the last spell card I play is 1 copy of Monster Reborn. This should be fairly obvious because this deck loves special summoning stuff, and this is one of the easiest cards to set up, especially if you have an Ostinato. You know, if you summoned a Shuberta and then it got destroyed, you summon your Arya Elegy to your side of the field. Next turn, you can Monster Reborn that Shuberta back out, and then you have a beat stick and a kind of boss monster to play around with as well. So, pretty good synergy with the deck. Okay, so moving on into the trap cards, we're only playing 2 different traps here. So I'm playing 2 copies of Back to the Front, and the reason why I'm playing this is because of Kaijus. Kaijus are definitely a thing with 3 slumbers now, so playing Back to the Front is a great way to help you recover some pieces back to your side of the field if they tribute over an Arya or tribute over an Elegy. So this is just a way to kind of recover a board on our opponent's turn, so you have to wait until it's your turn again after your field's been completely devastated. So it's definitely a really nice clutch tech that I've been trying it out, I've been testing it, and it's been working out really well. The times I took it out, I kind of missed it, so decided to put 2 copies in. You don't really want to open it first turn, but yeah, it's something that's nice to draw into mid-game. And then last but not least, we have to be playing this if we're playing Melodious, right? We're playing 3 copies of Mistake. This just prevents either player from searching, and because we're playing Melodious, and if you might have noticed by now, we can't search in this deck. There's no searchers, no rotas, nothing of that sort. Indulgence or Extravagance, or even Desires, if you're playing that, is all just drawing cards, which Mistake doesn't stop. That's the reason I definitely recommend playing Ash Blossoms, because Ash Blossom can stop your opponent's draw cards, whereas Mistake stops your opponent's searching cards. So it kind of slows slows down the game state to the point where you can actually hope to try to manage your resources better than your opponent. Melodious do struggle in that regard, and being a pure Melodious build, there's definitely a lot of consistency issues, but this is the best that I can do as of right now with the current TCG card pool. But yeah, that does it for the main deck. Next off, we're going to go into the extra deck. So for the extra deck, starting off, because we're playing Extravagance or Indulgence in this deck, you can obviously tweak this if you're playing Desires to play more variety of cards, but because there's a chance of banishing some of the better cards in the extra deck, the ones that we can more consistently summon, I'm playing multiple copies of those. So that just a heads up before we get into this. But we're starting off with 2 copies of Hippo Shinigen. Normally I'd only play 1 and I'd, put another card in here, but Hippo Shinigen is a card that's really easy to summon in Melodious, and it helps boost up our monsters' attacks. So it's really nice because of the fact that typically if you have Aryan Elegy, you're forcing a beatdown style because you have a bunch of protection on your side of the field and you're just attacking to your opponent's monsters. Hippo Shinigen helps you get there, especially if you have like extra cannons or a soprano that you normal summoned. You can always go for this and then boost up the attack of all of your monsters, especially coupled with a few sonatas. You're gonna have a lot of pressure on your side of the field. So 2 copies of this just in case you do banish 1. With your Extravagance. Next off, we're playing some toolbox cards. So I'm playing 1 copy of Cerberus, 1 copy of Phoenix, and 1 copy of Unicorn. Cerberus is actually pretty good this format now, so it's not too bad to have access to. Phoenix, of course, popping back row, and Unicorn is just to climb with either of these, or even a Hippo Shinigen as like a little spot removal. Probably the best nightmare that there is because it can hit anything. But yeah, a little more difficult to summon, but because Melodious monsters tend to just stick around on the field, you do have a lot more resources to work with. So that's the reason why the Nightmares are actually in here, and you'll see some higher link monsters in just a bit. So yeah, moving on, speaking of the higher link monsters, we are playing 2 link 4s with 1 copy of Borolo Dragon and 1 copy of Boral Sword Dragon. Now, you don't have to play these. These are definitely cards that are not summoned nearly as frequently as the other link monsters that I just mentioned, but these are definitely cards that help you put pressure on board, and honestly, against some casual decks, Borolo just wins you the duel by itself because it can't be targeted by monster effects and just puts a lot of pressure on your opponent. And Boral Sword is here for the OTKs. Really easy to pull off, but again, you don't have to be playing this. You can play something else in its stead instead. Okay, this deck is really highly customizable. I'm just giving you guys my specific build on it because the fact that it's a little bit more difficult to try to modernize Melodious when it's not getting more modern support by Konami. Alright, so anyway, we're playing 1 XYZ. Of course, you can replace this as well, but we're playing 1 copy of Tornado Dragon for that back row removal. Exciton Knight's also not a bad option if you want to consider that. Baguska as well. That's pretty good this format too. So yeah, any rank 4 of your choice if you find the space for it. And then last but not least, we're going into our fusions. So for our fusions, we're playing 3 copies of Schuberta, the Melodious Maestra. We're playing 2 copies of Bloom Diva, the Melodious Choir, and 2 copies of Bloom Prima, the Melodious Choir. Now, this this is typically not a ratio that I would be playing, but because the fusions are the most consistent source of extra deck summons that we have in this pure Melodious build, and because we're playing Extravagance / Indulgence, whatever you want to call it, it's really good to have extra copies just in case, you banish a copy of Schuberta or 2, you banish a copy of Bloom Diva or Bloom Prima. You want to have those options available to you mid to late game for you to still apply pressure onto the board. But yeah, anyway, that's going to be it for the extra deck, and that's going to be it for the deck profile. So thank you all so much for watching this video. I really do appreciate it. If you enjoyed it or found it helpful, please leave a like, subscribe for more Melodious content, and leave a comment down below letting me know what I can do to improve. And until next time, take care.